ultimately, just given the size of the country, if there is going to be demand for good governance and the constitution has formally recognized the third tier, this accountability will have to come from them. And as and when we have problems of scale or coordination, we will have to think of institutional frameworks within which services can be delivered through development authorities or metropolitan framework, but the governance must have the local government elected persons in charge. So accountability has to be theirs. Now, the Swachh Bharat Abhiyan rightly places the highest emphasis on water and sanitation. In fact, when you think about it, it's really surprising that we've spent 60 years and we needed to have this Abhiyan from the government of India to talk about water and sanitation. And there are some people who even today say, but you know, this is a municipal task. Why is the government of India taking the lead? My take on that is that actually you cannot achieve anything, any growth, any sustainable growth, any inclusive growth, no public health conditions, unless and until you have a clean India campaign. So Government of India, state government, metropolitan authorities all have to work together to see that the responsibility that has been assigned to the urban local governments, that is actually discharged, and people participate in seeing that we make Swachh Bharat a reality. People's participation in getting this done would be extremely important. And as I said, there would be some instances where municipal governments on their own can do it, others where they have the scale but not capacity and money, when the state will have to hold hands, and yet other instances where a few municipal governments will have to come together and develop an institutional framework so that they can actually exploit scale economies. I was in Tokyo a week ago, and I visited their water authority and also their incineration plant. And on water, they were saying that there are 23 small municipalities outside of Tokyo. And the water distribution network is planned in a coordinated manner by the Tokyo municipal government with these 23 others. So we really need to look at solutions like that. You also hear a lot of talk of Rurban, and this is very similar to the old Pura concept that we also used to hear from President Abdul Kalam. Now, so long as Rurban means that we need to foster rural-urban synergy, I think that's a very, very desirable way of looking at it in this manner. But we must ensure that where there are industrial investments, we are really looking for urban infrastructure and not just make do rural infrastructure. The National Urban Development Mission, which the minister also referred to, which is coming up, must incorporate the lessons learned from JNNURM. Reforms in planning, management, and finance must be at the core of the mission. JNNURM had started out right, but somewhere along the way, reform conditionality could not be enforced, and we have seen the consequences of that. This time around, the program should be designed in a manner where it really gives this push to reforms at the state and the local government level. And for this, the capacity building at the local government level is crucial. This was a major challenge during JNNURM, and it is not about setting aside some money to spend on project costs or capacity building, because I think JNNURM tried to do the same. but there really was not effective demand. You know, if you don't know that you don't know, then how does someone go and tell you you need help? So you need to also create the awareness that you need capacity at all levels of government, and then have a program by which you actually build that capacity. The one area which has not received as much attention during the JNNURM days, and it needs to be focused very much, is the importance of connectivity. Because JNNURM was looking at projects within city governments, the focus ended up being much more on water and sanitation and maybe urban roads and all, but not on transport, traffic support infrastructure, connectivity across cities and between cities and villages. That actually is extremely important. The importance of public transport, how to give better quality public transport so that we don't have to then go import machines to measure the quality of our air. What good is it to measure how much, PM, whatever number we are breathing or not breathing, when common sense tells us that we should not be using diesel to drive our cars and jeeps, and that we should be relying on public transport and have roads before you have vehicles, proliferating on the roads. There is urgent need, when we talk of transport and connectivity, there is urgent need to develop a strategic vision for metropolitan regions to begin with focus on transport. JNNURM neglected this aspect of urban development, and perhaps this is an area which should now be picked up. It is a legitimate question to ask, how will such metropolitan region development be financed? Now, this is not an area in which we have done any research, but I'm flagging it because we are doing collective thinking. It's all very well to say user charges and predicted and guaranteed transfers to local governments and devolution and all for service delivery. But when you're talking of transport development, metros and metropolitan regional development connectivity, you really need to get some minds together on and put some institutional framework in place on how this whole effort is going to be financed. But it will not rest only with procuring finances, because even the procurement of finance, whether it is from the private sector or the public sector, whether it is from the capital market or PPP, whatever it may be, even that will ultimately depend on your governance structure. Because if you don't have the governance right, nobody is going to fund these kinds of schemes. Now, Smart Cities mission provides opportunities for leapfrogging with the use of new technology. But as the minister himself pointed out this morning, I think it is a good initiative, and we must begin to work on smart cities. First, it will take a long time. Second, there may be only a few limited number of cities which satisfy the preconditions so that you can build smart infrastructure on them. But ultimately, we must recognize that smart city in our mind should be a city in which people demand good governance and the authorities deliver that the services and quality of life using new technology, smart leadership, and transparent and accountable framework within they can be judged. Only then we can call a city smart. And we are going through a stage where concept notes are being prepared and we are moving in that direction. So I would neither have very unrealistic expectations that just by putting smart infrastructure, we will get urban revolution, but at the same time, not knock it, because we need some demonstration effect of new technology to help, a better delivery of services. And finally, I would end up this presentation by saying that there's no question that sustainability of urban development is very important, but in communicating this message, importance of public health must be highlighted, because sustainability cannot be achieved without active cooperation of the people. And in order to get the cooperation of communities, civil society, people, we really need to highlight the public health connect, because there's nothing that makes people wake up and say, no, I will not have this waste sitting outside my road, when they know what the consequence of that is going to be. We should have known this all along, but we had turned our eyes away from that. And today the consciousness is increasing, and therefore we need to highlight that. Swachh, Swasth and smart cities must be the slogan for urban development. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Dr. Esher and Mr. Metal. Both very nice presentation, comprehensive. I think we should hear the last presentation before we throw open this for to say a few words at this juncture.
Thank you, Dr. Kasturvirangan, and thank you to ICRIER for having me here. It's a very tough act to follow, because after such a wide-ranging and comprehensive piece, which blends both youth and experience, we have. What I'm going to try and do is, since as a role as a discussant, my job presumably is to provoke discussion. I'll pick on a few themes that came up that sort of I like, and then quickly elaborate upon them in the 5-7 minutes that we have. So first, I think the issue about one of the best things I liked about this presentation was the focus on unified governance. We have created a structure constitutionally that is 74th and 73rd. There is one state which has been religiously representing against that particular structure, but that is what it is. But the census towns are merely one instrument or vehicle to remind us that a separation of local governance between urban and rural is almost essentially artificial, and therefore one needs to have a common governance structure at the local level. That's I think one of the big messages that we need to put together. It's a tough issue. It's a tough issue because will that, as Mr. Ramchandran spoke earlier, require constitutional amendments? Not necessarily, because states in their wisdom can choose to have a relatively more unified approach to local governance within the broad parameters of the 73rd and 74th, rather than having the kind of structure that you have right now, where panchayats have a certain degree of flexibility with a certain levels of structures, but in the urban areas, municipalities more or less handle solid waste management, and everything else is handled by some creature of the state government or the other. Once you have a unified governance and empowerment, what happens then? And what happens then, I think, is sort of something that I learned from my friends who do climate negotiations. And I think it sort of also has a reflection on the way we are thinking about smart cities. What happens then, in some sense, is there's a possibility that you might have bottom-up systems. The kind of stuff that Vaidehi spoke about when she spoke about STEM, where municipalities came together, and this could only happen in Maharashtra, because only in Maharashtra do the municipalities have sufficient agency or power to decide to come together. In other places, they do not even have the responsibility of providing water.